Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's session on innovation weeks around the world. We're very sorry for a few technical delays. We've had a very large panel discussion with very many people tuned in from around the world. So unfortunately, we had a little bit of trouble trying to get some of our speakers on, but the show must go on. We're here now, and we have our moderator, and I'm delighted to introduce Alex Roberts, who's the Deputy Head of the Observatory of Public Service Innovation. Alex is an innovation specialist and a deputy head of OPSI. Alex leads the work in OPSI studies of countries' public sector innovation systems, as well as contributing to the work of OPSI's innovation model. So without further ado, I'd just like to hand over to Alex.
Thank you very much, Vinny. I'm very pleased to be here today and to be joined by two of our panelists at the moment. We have Charlie Tsao from the Canadian Public Service, and Frits Bussemaker from Netherlands and the Rijks Innovation Community. Well, without a further delay, I'll go to Charlie to tell us a bit about Canada's Innovation Fair that's been running for a number of years. Charlie.
Excellent, thank you, Alex, and thank you to Vinny and company for inviting me. It was a pleasure to be here. And one thing I really want to emphasize before I go ahead is that I want to first and foremost pay a big thank you to all the volunteers and the organizers and the teams who have run with me for the past few years to make this event happen. It really is a collective effort. So I can't emphasize that enough. And of course, for your additional entertainment, you might see my cats running in the background or potentially snoring from time to time if they fall into a deep sleep because my presentation runs too long. So a quick preface right there. And then maybe a second piece of preface as we dive in is the context in which this event happened. In 2011 and 2012, the Canadian Public Service saw a series of deficit reduction. And in short, that was a number of cuts that really hit the morale of the public servants. And at that time, the head of the public service, the clerk of the Privy Council, as we call it in Canada, was looking for ways to reinvigorate and re-inspire the public service through a renewal/transformation agenda. And then at that point, one of the things that was really top of mind for folks was how do we bring about employees' voices? And so it was at that point where the grassroots movement was really catching on in a sense where we really wanted to hear from the employees as a way to engage them so that they're part of the co-creation process and looking at how the public service in Canada could be renewed. And so Blueprint 2020 was born in 2013, and that was a vision for a public service that's equipped to serve Canadians now and into the future. And that really is the foundation of why the Innovation Fair was built. The Blueprint 2020 at that time was focused on, so again, grassroots engagement about how public servants could be more networked, how we can connect with academia and the private sector, and making better use of technology, and more of a holistic approach to that, one where all the organizations and the close to 300,000 employees across the big country of Canada are all working together as one. And so then 2 years into that, in 2015, next slide, please. In 2015, that's really where things started to get rolling, where the team who was working on Blueprint at that time was really thinking about, okay, so how do we engage the public service at an even larger scale where we'll have a platform for people to connect with one another, number one, and one where people are able to share the latest and greatest and to really get a chance to collide. And that was one of the things that people have really been talking about, is that organizations in the Canadian Public Service have been working in silo. And consequently, a lot of the good things that was coming out of Blueprint 2020 that was inspired by that was not shared commonly across. And so really that's when this is the story that we tell all the time, was that the event was really conceptualized during a fire drill, when a group of people were in a coffee shop waiting to go back into their buildings to think about how can we engage. And literally, it was drawn up on a napkin to the innovation fair, and that's really how it was born in 2015. And really, it was the first of its kind. Before then, there wasn't an effort to connect all the public service together. So in 2016, it was built on that. It was the continuous growth of pushing that connectivity, so to speak. And this is where we also are starting to see, just in 2015, it started out as just a Ottawa-centered event. In 2016, we started to see other regions catching on. They're like, hey, wait a minute, we should also be taking advantage of this. So then that as broad as Canada is geographic wise, how do we connect that way too, to reflect some of the regional realities? Because not every region does the same work as Ottawa, and likewise, they're also facing different things that they're working on. Oftentimes, not just policy based, more what we call frontline. And so, continuing from that was 2017, where we saw an addition of different things, where we're starting to look at, wait a minute, there's just not just innovative things that we wanted to share. We also wanted to also focus on some of the government priorities that was starting to be more and more important. And we're starting to see that in 2016. And some of the things included mental health, accessibility, reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada, and as well as diversity and inclusion, which is a huge part of the social discourse now. And so, and also at the same time, 2017 saw the celebration of the 150th anniversary of Canada. And that was really when we started to look at, okay, with that, could we also expand the event so that it's even more public facing, not just one where it focuses on internal. And then came 2018. 2018 was when we saw a renewal and an additional refresh of Blueprint 2020. We went back to our community who was working on Blueprint 2020, and across from working level to senior management to look at where are we now with Blueprint. And at that time, one of the things that we heard back was the grassroots engagement was really important. Engagement itself was incredibly important. But it became really scattered. Even though we have events like this to help us focus in and to help connect people to work together to encourage more collaboration across the system, we're not rallying around specific things that we could say, hey, this is where we move the peg. And where do we inject some accountability and also respect that every region, every organization within the Canadian Public Service are ultimately working on different things and have different realities. And that's when in 2018, we started consulting. We started continuing to build the innovation fair to start looking more at that and add more cities. So you'll see that in 2017, it was really national in scope. And 2018, we just continued to grow that model. And so then in 2019 is when we used the innovation fair to also introduce our renewed renewal and transformation agenda, which is beyond 2020. And it was focused around agile, equipped, and inclusive, where 3 areas of focus that really allowed people to focus in on specific areas where departments could customize and choose how they wanted to do it. And we're also asking for departments to measure, find ways to measure how whether they're being more agile, inclusive, or equipped. And this is 2019 is where we also took advantage and took another step in saying that, hey, maybe we should also push more in promoting via social media. What we're starting to find throughout the years since 2016 was that we're getting increasing uptake in the use of social media in how they were taking in the event content in addition to the in-person event. So next slide, please. And so very quickly from 2015, when it was conceptualized on a piece of napkin as an Ottawa-focused event, it really started growing to be national in scope. We started to open up to the public, so that's not limited just as public servants. It also started to include more and more different areas of that was really important to the government of Canada. And it also allowed us to also started to socialize and include public servants in the next transformation agenda, which is Beyond 2020. And we were very, very, very proud to say that from 700 participants to over 10,000 participants in 2019, and thousands more online. So 10,000 is a rough estimate of the 17 cities that hosted events across the country, and not including the live stream components. And of course, you'll also see the social media sentiment and engagement reflected here also. Next slide, please. So quickly, just at a glance, just in 2019, these were the cities that partook in the festivities on different days throughout the country, only to reflect the idea that more and more cities are valuing the idea of this platform, number one, but also wanted the more individuality, that each region are starting to take its own shape and started to refine what innovation fair means to them in their region. Next slide. So what does that leave us? What does that leave us? So that what we're really seeing, and what I've been saying so far, is that it really wasn't just about innovation anymore. It was a much more inclusive model that does speak to an innovation aspect and how we're being innovative in a lot of the things that we're doing. And it doesn't need to be a big thing. It could be something as changing as something in a process that made us more productive in many ways. And it continues to reflect a lot of things that are important to us. As I mentioned before, accessibility, diversity, inclusion, mental health, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And of course, the growth that we've shown, very, very not to be so bold, but the growth trajectory is something that we're really, really proud of. But one of the things that we're noticing too, that at this juncture, is that we've really reached a stage of maturity from a piece of napkin. It is really now a steady state program that is really recognizable and people are looking forward to every year, and the momentum keeps building. And so in 2020, and as indicative of our transformation agenda and calling it Beyond 2020, we were really looking forward to 2020 as a way for us to really tie everything together and to show people how we've grown and how we've shifted just ever so slightly to evolve our renewal agenda to be one where it's much, much more focused, where people are able to customize, to inject more accountability, and the idea of mindsets and behaviors as well. We know that there's a lot of overlap between agile, inclusive, and equipped. And one where we're starting to encourage people that we all have agency over Beyond 2020, over our renewal agenda, and that it's not just senior management, it's not just employees, it's everyone's agency. And so how do we push managers to give employee the space? And how do we push employees to really voice what it is that they're thinking about? And so that was really one of the things that we're thinking for 2020. So how do we continue to grow it? How do we continue to make it more inclusive? And of course came the current situation that we're in right now, which is the pandemic. And we couldn't deliver the event in an in-person format. Next slide, please. And that's when we consulted once more. We were like, well, let's our community has been very, very strong and very, very supportive in the things that we're doing, including this event. But one thing that we really started to hear across the system, across all levels, was that, well, if not now, then when? Oftentimes, the Canadian Public Service is being accused of being too humble, that we don't really take the time to celebrate ourselves. And that really was part of the essence in 2015, was that not only are we finding ways to connect with one another, but we're also finding ways to connect and to celebrate our own stories. and through that, how do we continue to grow with one another? How do we collaborate more and more so that we're not sitting in silos? And then now I think it's really a full circle to get an opportunity. It's that to say that if not now, then when, to see beyond 2020 in action. And as I would encourage everyone to also read our clerk's report to the Prime Minister, and that we're really seeing beyond 2020 coming to life through COVID response. And so Fed Talks for 2020 will be a series of Fed Talks, which is modeled exactly after TED Talks. So it'll be 20-minute TED lifestyle talks over the course of 3 afternoons from November 24th to 26th, featuring COVID response and how we are working through this unprecedented times. So thank you. Hopefully I hit the time limit, and I'll pass it back to our moderators.
Thanks, Charlie. Just a reminder to those watching, you can inject your comments and questions in the chat function. I think it's got a lot of similarities in some of those stories from my own experience in Australia, where I helped set up Innovation Week, which became Innovation Month, and has grown to be more of a national thing rather than just focused on in Canberra. But now I'd like to pass to Frits to ask about what you're up to with Innovember.
Oh, yes, Alex, thank you very much. Yes, first slide, please. I am the community manager of the Dutch government's innovation community. So that's my welcome slide. And I just want to go with you, first of all, where this comes from, because this is the organization which is organizing our very first in November, as we call it, Innovation Month. If somebody could push the button. A couple of years ago. Okay, if somebody yes, thank you very much. So a couple of years ago, 2 departments within the Dutch government realized we have so many isolated islands, patches in the Dutch government where people are experimenting, innovating, but left doesn't know what right's doing. So they realized we need to do something about that. So they formed the Dutch government's innovation community with the sole purpose to just link all those innovations to each other. And that's been working. It's been running for a couple of years. And now we have 8 departments. Somebody can push the button. And what we try to do is we link together innovators, innovation managers, all working for the Dutch central government. So that's the criteria to be able to enter that. But anybody else can join, provided they are invited or introduced by a member of the Dutch central government. So realize innovation, open innovation is done with a lot more people than just central government. But this is a way to make certain that we don't get swamped with entities who see a commercial opportunity. Next slide. So, and push the button again, please. So the audience is not only those innovators and innovation managers, because if we get those together, we create our own little silo again of innovators. We also want to make certain that we reach out to the policymakers and senior management, that they understand what innovation can do for them. Next slide, please. Next. And so our activities are organizing, the first 2 years we've been organizing a lot of monthly offline events, just getting people together and doing deep dive work groups. So we pick up a particular topic like procurement, innovative procurement is a topic, or what are the technology trends, and the people across government who are interested in the topic, they get together. And since COVID, we've done that online. The events are more frequent and shorter. So they cater for the online experience. And so last year we started to think about we need to organize an innovation month. So the 2 original founders of this community already organized Tech November, but then they realized a couple of things. First of all, innovation is not just about technology, it's also about, it has a much broader scope, social innovation, process innovation. And so we changed the name, and we've invited more departments to be part of that. Next slide, please. And yeah, so the innovation concept is we wanted to make certain that we talk about innovation across the board, realizing that social innovation is probably going to be a very large part of a government to innovate themselves. Yes, next slide. And so until now, we've talked a lot about innovation topics, but one of the key elements is also make certain that what we offer has cross-cutting themes. Because what I think what every government is seeing across the world is we have all these siloed organizations. So what we wanted to do is make certain that we pick up topics which allow us to link together people who are working on the same innovation, and so introduce matchmaking actually on all levels. So this whole innovation concept is congruent not only for the people who are going to watch this and follow this, but also for the organization itself. And if I go to the next slide. Oh yeah, and it's going to be fully aligned. Actually, that's something I forgot to mention. So when we started this end last year, and we realized we need to do this online, it actually, for us, became an opportunity, because our Dutch government is based out of the city of The Hague. And there's always this issue with, okay, is it going to be The Hague-centric, or do you want to make certain it is across the nation? The fact that we now are going to do it online, already from this very first start, we realized we have a great opportunity to showcase what we're actually capable of. And it takes away the geographic boundaries, and actually we're able to bring in much more people now that we're doing it online. So actually we've always seen this from the start as a big benefit. Okay, next slide. Okay, and please slowly build this up. So we have a core team of about 7 people from different departments building it up. From all the 14 departments now part of this organization, we have liaisons which then link to the individual speakers, and we report to a steering committee to make certain that we don't run over budget and actually still follow the strategy which we all agree to. Now, to make certain that we organize something actually people are interested in and provide a little bit of coherency. Next slide. We've also gave them a framework on what are the cross-cutting themes around data, around services, let's see, around sustainability. And we also have, from another angle, we approached from the technological side, organizational side, and innovation management side. So we just went out to each individual department, just come up with your ideas. And we really had a tsunami of great ideas. So what we then did as part of the congruent missions to start to connect and collaborate is, rather than having all these individual departments giving their own innovation talk, force them to collaborate together. So we only have about 100 slots to fill. We have at least twice, if not triple, the size of a number of presentations offered. But we want to get you to work together because you more or less want to present the same topic. And that in itself already generated quite an interesting discussions across the government, where people were starting to realize, hey, actually we should be collaborating on this, not just for the presentation, but all beyond the presentation. And that's actually one of the hidden agendas. So this all boils down to the next slide, what we've done. And that is, we're going to organize about 120 events starting the 3rd of November. We're going to have a plenary session. We're going to have a couple of themes the 2 days later, 6 programs where we're going to introduce what all the other sessions are going to be about the rest of November. Now that totals, I believe, over 120 sessions, and on the 27th we'll end and call it a day. And the whole purpose of this whole month is that we get people engaged on innovation, that we get people connected on innovation. So the technology we're going to use actually allows people to connect to other people who have the same interest. Because what we want to achieve is that at the end of the day, people will continue the discussion after November. So this is not something we just confine to that particular month, but this is a continuous discussion. So this is actually part of a cultural change to get people to realize that don't just work in your own small little department or ivory tower. Make sure that you connect, because there's so much knowledge and experience out there we can tap into. So if we get that message across, we're going to be very, very happy. And I can tell you, I'm only amazed with the numbers which Canada produced. I'm also aware of the numbers Brazil had. I think they had over 20,000 people joining their events last time. So it's going to be our first time to do it on this scale. Hopefully next time I can show you what the numbers are. But on the conservative side, we really hope that our opening event will at least attract over 2,000 people from the Dutch government. And really hope we're going to break that. So this is about sharing innovation with an emphasis on sharing. Innovation will come naturally. I think that was my last slide. And so it's going. This is what we're going to. What we've organized. The whole team is in full production mode at the moment, and so hopefully we can report something quite nice. Also, halfway through our event, we're going to do an OECD event, part of Alex's roadshow. So halfway through the month, on the 17th of October, we can probably give you some numbers and metrics of what we've done so far.
Thank you, Frits. It looks like our colleagues Lene, Jeppesen from Denmark and João, Sigora from Brazil aren't going to be able to join us today. I'll just make a quick mention of their respective events. So Denmark has quite a developed public sector innovation ecosystem, but this year they've chosen to create an innovation day. And Brazil, through their public school, their School of Public Administration, have been running Innovation Week for 6 years now, I think. And I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to be in Brasilia for a couple of those. And they are certainly very impressive events, and they're moving all of their events this year online, given the pandemic. But they've got quite a big lineup of things happening. Now, just I guess to reflect upon these different stories, part of the value of these sorts of innovation events is that it allows those different sorts of collisions and different conversations that you both talked about bringing people from different areas together to have conversations and share experiences and learn from each other's ideas. There can be immense value from those sorts of exchanges, but it's not something that's easy to prove or demonstrate. It's not easy as a KPI to say, people had this many conversations and therefore this value will be produced. How do you help communicate the value of these events as part of that cultural change, but things requiring support and financial support? Charlie, do you want to have a go?
Absolutely, and that I'll be super honest. That's some of the things that we're still thinking about right now. That's one of the things. Like, how do we introduce? Because it's not so difficult to capture in attendance numbers, as well as social media engagement, also the number of views that we get on websites. But it's much quite another thing to think about. Okay, so what about the value of people connecting with one another? And one of the things that we do is that we use we capture stories. We at this moment we collect qualitative data and also people's experiences at the innovation fair to allow us to use that as promotional material to be like, hey, these are the materials that and the experiences that we're hearing that's really contributing to the value of the event. And through that, we were able to build word of mouth promotion in addition to the usual channels that we use. Of course, traditional email, connecting with our management through social media, which is something that we're always trying to grow, thanks to my social media team. So that's really how we're doing the value of the event. But beyond that, finding a KPI to show that it's definitely something that's on our minds right now. That's an excellent question, and something that we'll continue to think through.
Yeah, and Alex, from my side, very much this is a belief statement, because as you're changing a culture, that's one of the metrics I would say very difficult to measure. You can definitely not measure this on a short term. What you can measure is just assuming that we've all had all these innovation initiatives over the years, the various parts of the government working on that over time you would hope that innovation across the board will become easier, because you're getting the opportunity to learn from each other. So you might see less reinventing the wheel, and it's what I find quite difficult to measure. But it's almost something you have to do anecdotal. Like this morning, we had a session on RPA, robotic process automation. So we had one Dutch government division sharing their experience on what they've done with RPA. And we've noticed just in that call, a couple of people replying in the chat, "Hey, I wasn't aware of this. Thank you very much." So I'm definitely going to have a look at this. So you're creating a non-causal reality, in the sense you do not know what would have happened if we were not able to introduce these people to each other on that topic. But if you make certain that you change the attitude, like, hey, collaborate across the board as much as possible, dare to ask questions, dare to ask help, and most people really want to help you there. I would say on the long run, you should see you could say new ideas, new concepts being introduced quicker for less money.
Hi, João. Finishing up a question, but
please,
when we come
sorry.
back, I'll throw to you.
I will say that I think one of the things that we could see as a potential proxy is the willingness to be, when we had our in-person events, one of the biggest components, and what we always say is the heart of the event, is the trade show. It's the where people have their booth and their kiosks. And so I would almost dare to say that could be one of the proxies in which we're really seeing that value, is that more and more people want a kiosk at these trade shows, so that they're able to showcase whatever it is that their organization is working on. And one of the things that we found also was that the high number of people interact in that space, just because not everyone has the opportunity to set aside a whole day or a half day to it. But oftentimes they'll be able to set aside 10 to 20 minutes to at least go through the event, to feel it and to meet people. And exactly like what Frits was saying too, is like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was happening, or I didn't know this was the case. That's exactly what's happening. And I think maybe one of the proxies is the increased number and demand of where people want to connect, people want to have a booth there, and people want to have content being showcased at these events is one of the proxies in which people are starting to see the value of this collision that we're seeing.
I'm quite optimistic, in a sense, if I look at both the numbers which Canada just showed us, and I know from Brazil, the fact that the trend is that it's growing. People are investing their time to have a look at this. And generally, I would hope that people value their time so much that it's going to be worthwhile. So if they do this, they're going to get something out of that. And I also realize what we're doing to some extent is we're organizing serendipity. We do not know upfront what's going to happen when we bring people together, but we do know if we bring the right type of people together, we increase the chance that it will lead to something meaningful.
Great. We've now got João joining us from Brazil. So welcome, João. Would you mind sharing a bit about Brazil's Innovation Week and the journey so far over the past few years?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex. It's great to be here with you. Thank you to the event organizers for the invitation. It seems we had a time zone confusion in the beginning, but I'm glad I'm here now. And I'll be able to share with you a bit about our own innovation network in Brazil and our Innovation Week, and share with you a special invitation because the event's taking place in exactly 4 weeks and it's open to international participation. So you're very welcome to join us. Registration are open. If I'm going to ask the technical team to please share my presentation with the audience. Can we do that? Great. So the event is taking place from November 16th to November 19th. That's exactly the same week as Government Aftershock, which is an initiative led by the OECD. Can we switch to the next slide? And then, so in Brazil, in 2016, we created an innovation network that gathers now over 120 member institutions who reaffirm their commitment to promoting public sector innovation in Brazil. And at the federal government, we now have 630,000 civil servants. So that's really a lot. And we are able now to reach a significant amount of them through this innovation. The Innovation Week, our own Innovation Week, is part of this main annual. It's the main annual event of the InnovaGov network, and it's open to the participation of the general public, either civil servants or not. Like most of you, I just forgot to mention that at the beginning. Like most of you, I'm also a career civil servant in Brazil. I work at the federal government innovation lab in Brazil. It's called Genova, and we're part of the National School of Public Administration of Brazil. So just to give you an idea of the evolution of the event, if we can move to the next slide, there you're going to see, and then you can see, and then if the technical team can switch to the different editions, I just want to point out very quickly. So the first edition, it was about transforming ideas into solution. The second one in 2016, in the next slide, is, can we move to the next slide? Oh, thank you. It's about governance, innovation, and development. And the other year, we in 2017, next slide, digital transformation. And then 2018, next slide, public service for the future. And then in 2019, that's when the event exploded and we really reached a massive audience. So we had 2,000 participants in person, but over 20,000 watching online, 4 days of event with over 150 speakers, over 100 institutions involved, 200 hours of program. And so we already had a challenge for 2020 because we knew we had to do better. And now we have to do better in a context of a global pandemics. So what I'm going to show to you is how we structure the event for this year. And then if we can move to the next slide, I think the first realization that we had this year is that it's not possible to organize an event and not discuss what's going on with us, right? So the topic, the overall theme we're bringing for this year is reimagining and building futures. So what we're proposing is to have the current crisis, which is a position of crisis in our opinion, to actually discuss and design our preferred futures. I think there are 2 different ways we can interpret this moment that we're living. I think one of them that we're seeing very often in the public sector, at least in Brazil, is to imagine that we have a future in front of us and imagining that it is ready and we're just moving towards it. So there are many people saying that, you know, we're moving, what would happen normally in 5 years in the public sector now is happening in 5 months. And that's partly right. I think digital transformation is indeed happening, distance learning, remote working, but that's a poor way of using and access maybe of the moment that we're living, because the future is now ready. We actually have choices, and we're going to expand this understanding of our futures at the Public Sector Innovation Week this year. So if you can move to the next slide. when we talk about crisis of imagination, we're talking about this not some ethereal dream. We're talking about the ability at looking ourselves differently than we are. And if you move to the next slide, I have a sentence from our concept note. When we do this, when we're looking at ourselves differently than we are, we're actually in this state of transition. We're reflecting being up to now, but we're trying to understand what we can be from now on. And that concept will be very important in the discussion we're trying to promote in the public sector in Brazil this year. So in the next slide, what we're doing is that informs the entire event for this year. So the virtual city that we have created to actually receive the activities of this year is called In Between. It's an in-between place. The name works better in Portuguese, but it still works in English. And if you move to the next slide, then I can offer a sneak peek. And then if you choose F, you can go full screen. And then I can offer you a sneak peek into this year. Oh, sorry. I think the previous slide was not completed. The video. Good. Next slide. So I just want to give you an idea of what we're going to find in Innovation Week. So just to help with the technical team, when I do this sign, it means you can move to the next slide, okay? So can we do that? So we have the main stage, which is the heart of the event. We will be streamed live from a physical stage. We have also on-demand content available for participants in the next slide. And then we have space for networking. We have thematic trails. So at given moments in the event, there will be over 15 activities running at the same time. And then just because I'm not controlling the presentation, can we just move a few slides over after these images? Thank you. So we're also an event aligned to Government Aftershock. So we're the Brazilian hub for this event. Many activities will be aligned, and the three main questions of the Government Aftershock, which is the beautiful global initiative that is happening at the same week, will guide all the talks in the main stage of the Innovation Week. So what do we want to keep? What do we want to leave behind? What should we do differently? Next slide, and I'm about to finish. So this is just a sample of the speakers we have confirmed for this year. So on the first day, we're having a beautiful discussion on civic engagement and solving public problems with Beth Novak and Tim O'Reilly, the creator of the concept of government as a platform. On the second day of the event, we have a great discussion on the future of the state with Nair Woods, Paul Collier, Dabi Samuel. And so this is just an idea for you. The next slide, just to give you an idea of how the the event is organized. So we have the main stage running for 2 to 3 hours a day. This will be available in English, Portuguese, and Spanish all the time with simultaneous interpretation. And when there's the main stage going on, there are no simultaneous activities. And everything that you see in green means that these are thematic tracks, activities that are happening simultaneously. And we actually use this to mobilize the innovation public ecosystem in Brazil. So there are proposals from different actors. Next year, if you want to propose an activity for us, you can. This call for activities is international. And then on the next slide, just to finish, registration. So you can use this QR code to actually register for the event, and then you can complete the registration through Simpla. This is available in English, and the official website will be available in English in a few weeks, in the first week of November. Here's the invitation for you to join us for this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, João.
Thank you.
Quite an impressive virtual space you have there. Looking forward to seeing it in action. Just because a couple of people have mentioned it, I might just take this moment to give myself a plug with Government Aftershock. Just noting that on the 17th of November, there'll be over 40 different events happening around the world, hosted by partners, all unified by those 3 questions that João mentioned. And then on the second day, we will be having a high-level forum with a range of leaders and policymakers from all over the world coming together to talk about how we take some of these hard-won lessons of this year and really integrate them and embed them in the work of government. And for our Irish colleagues watching today, we just had confirmation yesterday that Leo Varadkar will be one of the speakers. Just taking the time now to the others previously a bit about how do you capture the value from these events that, there's a lot of bringing people together, sharing ideas, the collision of different parts of the system. We know that there is value out of that, but how do you sort of help legitimize it and demonstrate that value to others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, today we think the Innovation Week is not just an event, it's more like a platform to actually bring people together. It's about also empowering civil servants as the main actors in the public innovation arena. So I think that's very important to actually make sure they are in contact with everything on and learning methodologies, but it's not just about that. It's about empowering them and actually making sure they use and they have the space to be heard, to present their ideas. For example, we have one stage in the Innovation Week that is dedicated all the time to the presentation of best practices and different cases and stories from the public sector. So I think that's very, very important. And the way you communicate that is also very important to the society. And it's also tricky for governments because usually people think that government events have to be bureaucratic, formal, and you have to have a good way to communicate that in the public sector, we can also have this sort of event and that they generate value. And if they didn't, the private sector wouldn't organize this sort of gatherings as well. So it's very important to have a good communication strategy. And of course, being able to show numbers and results and show the number of activities organized, the partners involved, that's all very important.
Thank you. Now,
thank you.
We're seeing from each of these presentations and discussions that there are very different contexts, but we're all facing similar sorts of issues. We're all humans working in a system that pushes towards working in silos, and there's that need for explicit sharing and learning. I guess a follow-up question for you all then would be, how do you build on those collisions? How do you make sure that those pockets of innovation that you see and can highlight during these events how do you keep that going beyond an event or a period? How do you join those pockets of innovation up more long term? Frits, I might go to you.
Well, that's actually the reason why I introduced first that we have this Dutch government innovation community. So what we do is we have a continuously year through discussion on innovation with a drumbeat of activities throughout the year. And every time we see that a discussion will lead to a deep dive, lead to a follow-up, we want to capture that, support that, facilitate that people do connect and collaborate on that particular topic. And in exchange for that, we ask, can we share that knowledge, share your experiences with the rest of the larger community? So it's very much an activity of showcasing the connections you've made and the results, and hopefully that will inspire other people. Hey, look, we're actually doing something quite good here. So that's at least the approach we're taking so far.
And João, how have you gone with? I mean, the Genova network, NovaGov, has been important for feeding into Innovation Week. But how do you link the two? How do you leverage the momentum from Innovation Week to make sure that those conversations are going on all year round, not just in the week?
Yes, that's very important. And part of what we do in making sure it's not just Genova, it's not just an app proposing our activities. We actually bring all these partners together and to organize activities, actually the proponents, and they organize it themselves. And usually these events have developments. They start conversations that need to be followed up, and having them as the main actors, as leading actors in this with us, allows us to just be the middleman, just having intermediating all contacts. You know, they start actually developing their own networks. And the way we've been connecting this is also through periodic additional events throughout the year. So we have one monthly event that is smaller. It's a gathering of innovations in government. It's called G and Papo. We organize it monthly. We also have different thematic. WhatsApp is so popular in Brazil. People, it has replaced the mail basically nowadays. So we have different groups in this innovation network dedicated to different areas, and they also can organize activities in person. Before the pandemics, they could organize, and we hosted these activities at the National School of Public Administration. So it's making sure we always have things going on in this network, because that makes sure it's not just one innovation week, it's actually an innovation year.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Charlie, how have you managed in terms of, I know the Beyond 2020 work, the public service renewal work is integrated through a number of ways, but how do you make sure that focus on innovation continues all year round and help empower people for that?
I absolutely. I think I 100% agree with my panelists. Is one where a cadence is developed and continuous conversation. We also host monthly calls with our what we call Beyond 2020 champions, those who are senior managers at each of the organizations who represent Beyond 2020. So we continue the dialogue monthly, as well as using different platforms, using social media, using our website, using email, and using our collaborative platforms to continue dialogue, to make sure that those dialogues are the things that actually inform our events, and that it's all part of a continuum. And so I couldn't agree more with my panelists, and that's really we've been able to benefit from that is the continuous engagement, continuous consultation, and the continuous dialogue, of course, supplemented with different events that help us, and collaborating across the system that really help us to hear number one, hear what's happening. Two, how do we continue to push collaboration, and also to use these events as a start of a dialogue that will continue throughout the year and years to come.
Cheers. We're getting towards the end now, so I want to ask one last question of each of you. Given what you've learned and your experience with your respective events, what advice would you provide to our Irish colleagues as they build and develop their own Innovation Week? Charlie, start with you.
Absolutely. So one of the things is be prepared that there are only going to be more and more voices who are going to be saying, hey, I want to be part of this. And so I think it's welcomed, but also one where you have to be prepared to manage. It's like, okay, we have this growing demand. How do we meet it? How do you, and oftentimes we find ourselves being a victim of our own success, that the bigger we grow it, where do we go from here? And so that's number one. And how do you continue to engage to be more inclusive is another thing, is that more and more we're finding that, hey, maybe we missed a certain department, certain organization, or certain groups that could have really helped the conversation. And that really is at the foundation of our Beyond 2020 framework. And of course, how do you find resources to continue to help us build, whether through existing networks, collaborating with a private sector or the academic community. Those are all very near and dear to our hearts, and we're still continues to find how do we push that, and how do we continue to grow those relationships so that we can make the event bigger, but not only that, more inclusive, more holistic.
And João, what advice would you share?
I would agree. I would say be inclusive and maybe apply platform thinking to it. Don't think that you have to organize yourself. Everything to do is to provide a platform for people to add value, to bring their ideas, to bring their own events within your events is important. And also invest in people, make sure you have a good team involved, and make sure your event is people oriented. That's what makes all the difference. Understand that good event is about good speakers. It's not just about people joining to watch talks. It's much more about what happens in between this talk, generate this kind of content and make sure they keep going on. So that would be my message.
And lastly, Frits, what would your advice be?
Hi, Alex. Well, in this current day and age, we're shifting from a command and control to a connect and collaborate society. So it's that cultural shift. So we've all grown up in a world where having unique value propositions, what sets us apart, are seen as success criteria. And I would urge the organization, actually just very similar to also what has been mentioned by the other speakers, to provide a platform and also look what you have in common. So don't focus on the differences, but focus on what actually brings you together. And sometimes you realize you're approaching the same content from a different perspective. But once you get through that hurdle, and most of the time it's much smaller than you think it is, the content will bring it together.
Thank you so much. Now I might pass back to Vinny to close this out. Vinny?
Thanks so much, Alex. Just good news for João. I was able to get your QR link and sign up for your Innovation Week in Brazil. So hopefully when the restrictions are lifted here in Ireland, I'll be booking my first class flight over to Brazil to join you, hopefully.
Same here as well.
Excellent. I suppose, thank you so much to all our panelists for your patience. We're working off possibly 5 different time zones. So we had a bit of technical issues to start, but thanks to your flexibility, we were able to get through it. I really want to thank João, Frits and Charlie for joining us. Apologies to Lene, who couldn't actually log in for technical reasons. And a massive thanks to Alex Roberts then for moderating the session so professionally. While everything was coming at him, he was able to seamlessly deal with it. So thanks so much, Alex. I just want to highlight a few things. Tomorrow morning, we have an RPA session at 9:30. We have our public service leaders on innovating through a crisis at 11:30. and then our innovation scorecard at 2:15. So we look forward to everyone logging in tomorrow for our final day of Innovation Week. Take care.